this special period of Elul. I'm sure you all know that basically Elul is the time when Moshe Rabbeinu went up in the mountain for the third time.
You started?
I heard.
You started?
To receive the second luchos. This was then a very special time, because this was a time when after that the Yidden had fallen down to the lowest ebb imaginable, where after standing by Har Sinai and receiving the Torah directly from Hashem, they fell down into making the Egel Hazov, the golden calf. And Moshe Rabbeinu was able to reverse the whole attitude. He brought Eden back to Hashem, and he also received from Hashem assurances that he is with them, that he still is connected to the Jewish people and he still loves them. And therefore this is a very, very special time historically. As a result of that, we have the month of Elul all the way till after Yom Kippur. These are the 40 days. The month of Elul, which is 30 days, and 10 days of Tishrei. And Yom Kippur, in fact, Yom Kippur is, in a sense, Matan Torah, because this is when Moshe brought down the second luchos. And the Alter Rebbe illustrates this special period of Elul by the parable of saying this is like a king who is coming, who was invited to take over the reins of government in a certain city, and the king is approaching the city, and in his approaching the city, he's still in the field prior to entering the city. At that time, the king is very pleasantly disposed to all, and is very approachable, because he is already the king, in effect, because he was invited, but he has not yet assumed the reins of government, and therefore he does not have yet to show a stern face and a stern rulership. So he's very approachable. He's very amicable. And this is the month of Elul. The month of Elul is the month when Hashem is very close to everyone. And therefore it is appropriate time for us to reflect, what does it mean to be close to Hashem? At the same time, this is also the Pasha Shoftim. And the Rebbe points out that Pasha Shoftim is always, without exception, in the month of Elul, and the first Pasha of the month of Elul. Therefore, Pasha Shoftim illustrates and demonstrates and gives us directives to understand the union of Elul. One of the psukim, one of the mitzvahs in this Pasha, will enable us to join these two together and to draw an insight regarding the point which I made before, the union of closeness with Hashem. The pasuk says, "Tomim tiheye im Hashem Elokecha," which means, in literal translation, you should be whole with Hashem. Whole, complete. And the pasuk directly speaks about the fact that there were many people in those days and in all times that seek to guide their lives on the basis of some contrived truth. Contrived truth means truths which they derive from some solar indicators, natural indicators, trying to figure out things ahead of time. And Hashem says that this is something which is an abomination for him, which is something which is a te'eva, it's an abomination, it's impure, and that the Jewish people, they should stay away from this completely. And the opposite of it is described as Tomim tiyem Hashem Elokecha. You should be whole with Hashem. What does that mean, you should be whole with Hashem? So Rashi right away explains that it means Al tidrosh achar ho'asidos. Do not seek to know the future. Do not seek to outwit. Everybody knows what that means. To be smarter than Hashem, who is leading the world. Recognize what there is in front of you. Try to understand what that demands of you, what that means to you, what you're supposed to do with it, and follow through. And let Hashem do his bid in terms of leading you and leading the world. If you will be tomim, you will be whole, Rashi says, you'll be wholehearted, you'll be trusting in Hashem, then that will automatically make you be close to Hashem. You will walk your life with Hashem. Now this is, in a certain sense, quite an obvious directive. We certainly have to learn and train ourselves to accept whatever comes to us in a manner as being an instruction, as being a guide as to what we are supposed to do. There is also a more general instruction coming from this pasuk, Tomim tiyem Hashem Elokecha, which helps us in a very broad and deep way to understand our world and to understand to understand ourselves and to understand how we can interpret our world. As an example, there's an ongoing debate, I'm sure everyone here is aware of it, for thousands of years, whether the earth circles around around the sun, or the sun circles around the earth. Now this debate is based on trying to explain various phenomena that are observed in the natural world, such as the change of seasons, day and night, the various yearly cycles, the proximity of the various planets to one another. We, the Jewish people and the Torah people, we maintain steadfastly that the sun circles around the earth. And why are we so sure about this? What does it mean to us? What difference does it make to us whether the sun goes around the earth or the earth around the sun? Why are we involved in that debate altogether? This circling, this changing of day and night and changing of seasons is a physical phenomenon. But to us, it means more than a physical phenomenon. To us, there is no such thing as a natural physical phenomenon. To us, this means this is how Hashem conducts His world. We say in davening, especially on Shabbos where we have a longer davening, where we are more specific, when we say, Moitzi chamo mimkoimo, that Hashem brings forth the sun from its place, Ulevono mimchen shivto, and the moon from its resting place, Umoy loilum kuli, and then He illuminates the whole world. Which means to us, the sun giving light is not a natural phenomenon. It is Hashem with His own hand taking the sun and moving it and bringing us light. And this is why we say this in davening. Meitzi chamo min koimo. Now, the Jewish people have not been known to be blind or stupid or naive. We know that there are natural setups. Which can be explained in all kinds of different ways. But to us, the natural world is secondary to the godly world. Which means that essentially what is happening is that Hashem gives us light. How Hashem contrives it, how He works it out, that's none of our business. What concerns us is that we're living in a living world that Hashem leads and guides. The Rebbe was deeply involved in this debate with contemporary scientists, and the Rebbe had clearly stated that according to most modern, most advanced science, this whole question is a moot question because it's impossible to know, physically speaking, which body rotates around which. Because there are two bodies in space, and there is the concept of relativity, and the whole movement is just relative to one another. There's no such thing as an absolute rotation. And therefore the Rebbe concludes the following. What's important to understand is what is the significance of this rotation, not what is the physical phenomenon of this rotation. What does it represent? Now, to the naturalist, people who do not relate, who do not see the world as a meaningful place, as a purposeful place, then nothing, there is no significance to it. The sun happens to be in place, and the earth happens to fall in a certain location facing the sun, and therefore it has light. It's nothing to do with anything. But the Torah clearly states that Hashem created the sun and the moon and the stars in order to give light to the world. Therefore, what takes place here? What takes place here is the sun gives light to the world. And therefore the Rebbe says the following profound and simple statement. And he says like this: between the sun and the earth, in terms of revealing God's presence, in terms of significance, which one is superior to the other? The earth has the human being. The earth has a Torah. The earth has mitzvahs. The earth had God's revelation in giving the Torah. Clearly, the earth is the most significant between the two. Therefore, the earth is the master and the sun is a servant. And it is perfectly logical to say that when there is a master and a servant, it is the servant that does the legwork to serve the master, not the master that walks around to get the benefit of the servant. Now, we can debate this, we can discuss this, and there are profound insights in this. Bringing it back to the principle that we started. Tomim tiyem Hashem Elokecha. When a Yid looks at his life and looks at the world from the perspective of being with Hashem, of being Hashem's servant, of fulfilling Hashem's directive, then he looks at the world as Hashem's creation. Doesn't look at it as a natural, an accidental phenomenon. And therefore, to him, when he sees the sun rise in the morning, he takes it, he clearly relates to it as Hashem waking him up, bringing light, and waking him up and saying, okay, it's time to do the morning service. This is the simple way that a human being observes the whole phenomenon. So if he is Tomim im Hashem Elokecha, if he is whole with Hashem, if he sees things from the perspective of his relationship with Hashem, he has no compunction at all, he has no doubt at all. He has no confusion. He clearly sees what it is. Only if he wants to know things on his own, other than the way Hashem presents it to him, will he then begin to dig, but how does it happen? Does the earth rotate? And is there another way of explaining it? Looking to, so to speak, confuse himself and saying, no, don't take things at face value. This is the way it appears to you. But there are other ways of looking at it. There are other ways of looking at it only if you lose sight of your connection with Hashem. But if you relate it directly to Hashem, then you have no other way to look at it. You don't need another way to look at it. Why would you want to have another way to look at it? It's very clear and very pure that this is a living world, and Hashem provides all the needs for this living world. This is one illustration of the principle that we've said before, that especially in month of Elul, we seek to recognize our closeness to Hashem. We seek to recognize Hashem's presence in our very lives. Even though we don't see Hashem, but we see His presence in every aspect of our lives. Even to the point of seeing day and night, and we see, oh, okay, you see, the sun is moving, the sun is making light, this is what Hashem intended to do. It's not an accident, it's not a natural phenomenon. This principle of Tomim Tiyim Hashem Elokecha extends itself and translates on a constant basis not in a formulated way, meaning, oh, something happened, oh, that's a sign of this, something else happened, that's a sign of this. We're talking about something very simple, very smooth, something that follows the natural path, the natural trend, something very, very amicable, and all of that is all Hashem's handiwork. In the principles of a king, of a melech, in today's parsha speaks also about Minui Melech, and we say that Rosh Hashanah we are approaching, Rosh Hashanah where we coronate Hashem as a king, and the king is approaching the city, as the Alter Rebbe explains, he is also approaching in order to be coronated. In the principle of a king, as the Torah prescribes it, and Chassidus explains it and expounds on it, we do not have today a proper illustration of kingdom from any physical worldly situation. But if we project our thought, if we would imagine, or let's say we imagine Melech HaMoshiach, we would imagine a real king. A real king, Rashi says, that Hanosi Hu HaKoil, that the king represents the entire people. The king is everything. Why is the king everything? The reason that the king is everything is just as in a person has hands and feet, and he has 5 senses, he has 613 limbs that constitute the human being. And all of these things have to function, have to be healthy, in order for the human being to be a healthy and functioning person. How is it that a person has two hands, a right hand and a left hand? And they have different capabilities. The right hand picks up the pencil to write, and the left hand automatically puts its weight down on the paper so that it shouldn't move and it wouldn't disturb the writing done by the right hand. Why doesn't the left hand say to the right hand, I don't want to be your servant. You hold the paper, I'll write. There is no such conflict. What is it that coordinates all of this? And it coordinates it in such a smooth way that it isn't that you have to command the left hand or you hold the paper down and you write. You don't need to be coordinated, it's automatic. Why is that? How does that happen? That happens because there is a brain, which is the seat of life. And in this seat of life, this is where the king is. This is what the purpose of whole life is. And every part of the person, every one of his limbs and every one of his other capabilities is dedicated to fulfilling the desire that's in that life. They're completely dedicated to it. And why are they dedicated to it? The reason they're dedicated to it is that without that purpose, without that life that the brain supplies, there is no value to the right hand, there's no value to the left hand. If the right hand is capable of writing, but it doesn't have what to write, has no thought, no seichel, what's the purpose of that capability? In other words, all the limbs in the human body and all the koiches, all the powers that coordinate and that constitute the human being, are totally dedicated in what we call the Chassidus bottle. They're completely null in the presence of the life of the person, of the brain. Why? Because they recognize that this is what gives them value. Without that, there is no value to them. In other words, the brain is what gives value, what elevates all the capabilities of a person to a level that they have a value. In a similar fashion, a king in his nation is not just a ruler who commands, you do this, you do that. The king unifies the entire nation, because the nation recognizes in the king his spiritual and intellectual superiority, so that by associating with him, they're elevated to a much higher level. They're elevated to a purposeful and meaningful level. This is what the function and this is what the king does for the people. This is why the people are completely united and bottled to the king, because he actually gives them their value. Translating this in our lives, translating this in the world, and in what we spoke about, Tomim Yitim Hashem Lekecho, when we, as a Jewish people, observe and recognize the presence of the world, along with lahavdil, all the animals, they see the world, and the goyim see the world, but we see a different world. To everything else and to everyone else, there is a world. Just like in a human body there are limbs, there is a right hand and a left hand. And the world perhaps has a ruler, perhaps has a plan, but basically what we see is the world. And since this is what we see is the world, and this is why there's a tendency, I want to know how the world works, and I want to know what the future, what the indicators are from the solar system, the stargazers and all that. I want to see what the world shows itself. To the Jewish people, the world as such is totally insignificant. This is not what we associate with. Just as when you look at a person, you don't look on the fact that he has a right hand and a left hand. You look at the fact that he is alive, that he has a brain. That's the center of the person. To us, the world as such, the physical world, is not what we recognize, what we see. We see the physical world through the presence of the creator of the world. We see the physical world only in the sense that it represents a godly presence. Thus, when we see the sun rise, we say, what does that mean? It's not the physical phenomenon that the sun rises. It is, what does it stand for? What does it represent? And when we understand what that phenomenon means, what that phenomenon represents, that the sunrise means that there is going to be light in the world. There's going to be day, which means this is the time to do Avodas Hashem and so forth. Then the sun becomes an entity. Then it comes into focus. Then the world is here. Then the sun is here. As such, from a physical perspective, it doesn't mean anything to us. This means that essentially the real experience to us, the real experience of there being a world, the real experience of there being another day and another night, the real experience of there being us and being a yeshiva, being everything around us, does not start from the experience of what we observe physically, but rather it starts from our recognition that there is a creator to the world, that there is meaning to it. And after that we recognize that there is meaning to it, this is when we recognize that it also exists. Perhaps this is a little bit vague. Let me illustrate this from the phenomenon of light itself. As we spoke before, the sun rises and gives light to the world. From this perspective, it seems that light is created by the sun. That's when the light started, when the sun came. But if you look in the Chumash, you know that light was created the first day of creation, and the sun was created on the fourth day. Which means that light was not created together with the sun. On the contrary, light was created on the first day. Because light defined the principles of the creation. Light and dark, day and night, good and bad. On the fourth day, the sun was created in order to serve on the physical level for us light. In other words, it wasn't the sun that invented that when light was invented. The sun was created later. As a matter of fact, if you look more closely in the Pasuk, you will see that when Hashem created the sun on the fourth day, He says He created the sun and the moon for many reasons. To designate the seasons and designate the various periods, and also to give light. Give light is like an afterthought. If you look in the Chumash, that's exactly what He describes. Now, what is this all about? What does this all lead us to recognize? And as I said, it may sound lofty, it may sound a little bit far, but we have to understand that it is far yet very close. It's a pasuk in the Torah, Tomim tiyem Hashem Elokecha. You should be whole with Hashem, and whole with Hashem means not only whole with Hashem at certain time, it means constantly and all the time. Because in fact, a Yid, without as much as knowing it, he recognizes Hashem's presence all the time, in every turn and everything that he sees. And in this recognition, what does he recognize in Hashem's presence? He recognizes, as I said, the purpose and the significance of things before he recognizes their physical being. Their physical being is only to support their purpose. Just like in a human being. The brain and his chayas, his will, this is the primary thing. The hands are there to fulfill that purpose. Not that the hands create the purpose. A person doesn't write because he has hands. He writes because he has something to write. And he uses the hand to write with it. So, to simplify and coming back, I know I kind of exhausted everybody here. To come back, you want to be brief, but okay, I want to come back to the principle of these two things. It is Elul, and it is also Pasha Shoftim, where it says, Tomim tiyem Hashem Elokecha. We have to know that these things are not far-fetched. They're not distant. These are things that precisely, this is how the Jewish people live. This is how a Jew thinks. in every aspect of his life, in every aspect of the world, he primarily recognizes its godly value. What is it for? What is its message? And thus, and that way, he is tomim, he is whole, and he is constant. He is complete. He doesn't doubt the future. He's not interested in how things are working. He knows only one thing: Hashem is the one who is leading it. There is an expression regarding Purim and Yom Kippurim. It says Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur is like Purim. So Purim is a very great day, so we can learn something from Purim. You know the story of Purim, that Yidden lived almost a whole year under the threat of annihilation. A whole year. The Gzeira, the threat of Haman came out in Nisan, and Purim was the next year, and in order. So almost a full year. Which was a very scary thing on a whole nation to live under such threat. So there's an expression in Kudetera, there's an expression that he says that even during that year had such pure faith, completely convinced, completely sure what they're supposed to do, no doubt whatsoever as to where they stand. In other words, there was no question at all as to maybe they should go over to Haman's camp and say, okay, you know, we abandoned the Jewish people. Such thing didn't exist. A whole year. But then there's another expression over there. I want to explain to you this expression. Another expression where he says that there wasn't a machshavas chutz. A machshavas chutz means an external thought. What is an external thought? It means the following. Clearly the Yidden stood and they were ready for sacrifice, and they had absolutely no question as to where they stood and what they wanted to do. But when the whole people live under such a threat a whole year, they begin to think, I have no doubt what I want to do, but is it possible that Hashem will save us? How can it be? What are the possibilities? Let's project. Let's see what the possibilities, what can happen. That's machshavas chutz. And he's going outside. He's kind of helping Hashem to think. When a Yid thinks, it's clear that Hashem is leading the world. It's clear that Hashem will ultimately bring about everything everything good that the world has to have. But then there is a thought, but how is it going to be? How is it going to work? How can it be? That already, in a sense, takes a person away from being under Hashem's wing. Tomim Tim Hashem Alekecha means I'm not totally disinterested in how it's going to be. I want to know what I'm supposed to do now. I want to know where is Hashem to be found now, and that's all. And what the plans are and how it's going to work out, that is completely outside of my purview. I don't even want to know how it's possible that it should be. we are now waiting for the coming of Mashiach for so many years. And lately, the last few years, last several years now, the Rebbe said, Ot Kud Mashiach, here it is. Here it is. And Mashiach is such a revolutionary thing. Such a thing that completely revolutionizes the world. If one would begin to think, how is it possible? What's going to happen? How is it going to be? He would lose complete sight of it. Because there's nothing in the world that lends itself to that phenomenon. How can it be? Okay, I believe in it, but tell me, how is it going to work? That's already coming out of this tmimus. It says that Mashiach is going to come, and how it's going to be, that's entirely in Hashem's hands. And this is what the Pasuk says over here. Tomim, if you are a Tomim, then then you will be with Hashem. And Chas v'Sholom, if one loses that tmimus, and he begins to investigate and figure out and draw up possible scenarios of how it's going to be, then he loses complete connection to the whole thing. So, to summarize and reiterate, it's a very good and appropriate month now for us to connect and to associate purely and completely with Hashem in a pure way, and not to question how is Hashem going to accomplish such and such. How can it be? This is instrumental. This is the most proper time for this. And Hashem then accepts everyone and everyone's requests and everyone's prayers, because we're all very close to Him. And as a result of all our prayers and all our dedication and all our purity, that's the most important thing. This is what's going to be Mashiach.